Hello everybody. It has been quite a minute since I have posted on YouTube. I have tried to record different videos throughout the months and I've just felt I don't know. It just hasn't worked out well. I think I was feeling pretty creatively and just emotionally burnt out. I've been working full-time for the first time. And just also moved back home several months ago. So I've also been trying to navigate that. So I've just had a lot of changes. So I don't want to say that creating and posting hasn't been on the top of my priority list. It has been like the number one thing that I've been thinking about, just being creative and pouring more into my creative outlets. But I've just found it really hard to navigate with a full-time job and living at home. For this video, I wanted to talk about my Paris reading curriculum, or just pretty much what I plan to read while I'm in Paris. I'm in Paris right now. I have a trip here for 2 weeks and I love it. I've been here for a couple days so far and every moment that I take a second to just think about everything, I just feel so grateful. And I'm absolutely loving it. I wanted to share some of the things that I've been reading and some of the things that I'm going to read while I'm here, because one of my biggest intentions being here was just to be really present and just do a lot of mundane things like creating, painting. I brought a bunch of art supplies and raw canvases from home that I've been working on. And reading is one of the biggest things that I've been spending my time doing, and one of the biggest things that I want to be spending my time doing. So I wanted to share what I'm looking forward to reading. They're not in any particular order. The first 3 books are 2 of them I had already read, and then one of them I'm reading right now. So the first one is Getting Lost by Annie Ernaux. I had read one of her books before. I read her book Simple Passions a couple years ago. Very short book, very good read as well. I highly recommend it. Annie Ernaux is one of France's most popular and most renowned writers. Reading one of her books felt very fitting for my time in Paris. Again, I had planned to read this here, but I picked it up from the library, and then I ended up dropping the book that I was reading and just read this book in a couple of days, which honestly I don't recommend. When I read this book, I felt like I was kind of just cramming and just trying to read it to get it done, and I don't think that that's how this book should be read. So Getting Lost is a nonfiction book. It's a collection, or not a nonfiction book, but it's a collection of her diary entries over the years following an affair that she's had with a younger Russian man. And it's kind of showing how she kind of completely loses herself in the lovership that she's having with him. He's married, and all of her diary entries are just talking about how she feels, talking about how much she longs for him, how in love with him she is, how she doesn't think that he's gonna call her back. The entire book is pretty much her just sitting around and waiting for this man, or sitting around and thinking about how much she's losing herself, or sitting around and thinking about how painful it is to be in this affair but then not doing anything about it. And then you get little snippets when they finally do meet up and she is able to be intimate with him, or he does call her, and in those diary passages she's like, oh, I've just never been happier, I'm just on cloud 9. But then the rest of the book is just her yearning and her just completely losing herself in this affair. Again, this book, I read it quite quickly, and I don't think that that's how this book is supposed to be read. Just because it was very, very repetitive and also quite frustrating to just see it was just kind of, she was in this repetitive cycle, where she would be like, I'm gonna end things with this person, and then the next passage would be like, oh my gosh, he called and I'm so in love. Despite that, I think that her writing is just so raw and so vulnerable, and she just is so honest with how she feels. And it was nice to see her grow a little bit over the years, and I felt satisfied by the ending of the book. So I did think that it was a good read. All right, I loved this book. I finished this book yesterday, or day before yesterday. I finished this book while sitting under the Eiffel Tower. I started this one on the plane here, and this was a 5-star read for me, 100%. This is one of the best books that I've read in a minute, for sure. Follows the protagonist, David. He is, I don't know how old he is. I think he's maybe mid to late 20s. an American man living in Paris with some of his friends. And one day he's out at a bar with one of his friends and he meets this bartender, Giovanni, and he kind of sparks this. James Baldwin is quite vague about what their relationship really is, David and Giovanni's relationship, but it is a lovership of sorts. It's David's point of view and follows him while he's battling through kind of inner shame of what's happening. He also is engaged to another American who's like traveling in Spain whilst this is all occurring. And I guess that's kind of her right there. And then this is probably Giovanni and then David. I read the book with a different cover, so I'm like seeing this cover for the first time. Kind of just follows his inner turmoil and what denying yourself of the truth and kind of hiding who you are, how it affects you. And it's just really interesting to see how it shapes his relationships and shapes like how his brain is working throughout all these like inner turmoils and inner conflicts. And I really liked it. It was so beautifully written. It was just, despite this book having not like heavier contents, but it is a little bit of a darker read maybe. And it is quite deep despite the, I guess like deeper contents of the book. It was just so beautifully written. And I loved reading it in Paris because again, it's set in Paris. So it just was so satisfying to be in the same city that the book was set at. This was a 5-star read for me. I absolutely loved it. It had also been recommended to me for years. So I'm glad that I finally picked it up. All right, this one is my current read. It is Foster by Claire Keegan, not Barry Keoghan. Claire Keegan. It's a very, very short book, maybe less than 90 pages, I think. I started it yesterday. I'm gonna finish it before I get dinner later tonight. It's about this young girl, and she is sent to live with distant relatives. And it doesn't really explain why, at least it hasn't explained why yet in the book. So it's a little bit of a mystery. The book starts off very vague, kind of as I'm reading it, I'm kind of a little bit confused about what's happening, or just not really sure what the plot is, but it's kind of just about this young girl, and she had initially is from a very neglectful, maybe abusive home. And while she's living with this distant relative, she's learning what safety is like and what like kindness is like for the first time. And it's just like a very beautiful, very subtle story. I think it's one of those stories where there's not any like major plot points or like any major things happening, but it's just very mundane and subtle and beautiful, which is something that's very appealing to me right now. All right, this one I'm very much looking forward to. I guess I'm infatuated with affairs. I'm certainly infatuated with the trope of yearning and just how love can really affect a person, especially like the type of like forbidden love or forbidden romance is quite interesting to me right now. So Madonna in a Fur Coat, I've been wanting to read this book for quite some time. It's about a Turkish man who falls in love with this like beautiful painting, and then he discovers the artist behind the painting, who's this, I don't know what her nationality is, but this European woman, and they spark this very intense and very deep love affair that doesn't last very long. And then the book is set in the point of view of the man, and it just follows him throughout the years and how his entire life is shaped by this affair and how it's just completely irreplaceable and it's not something that he can really let go of. It's really interesting for me to read books where it's in the point of view of a man, especially if they're like deeply emotional and deeply like changed by love, because I feel like that's not something that's very common in real life to really get great insight into like the emotional vulnerability and the emotional depth that goes on in men's brains. So I think that while reading literature kind of based on that is really, really interesting, which reminds me, I forgot that I brought with me Heated Rivalry by Riley Reid, and that is one of the books that I'm going to be reading. Honestly, I'm so excited for it. I loved the show. I'm sure that everyone knows what Heated Rivalry is. If you don't, it's about these two male hockey players, and they basically have a 10-year-long situationship. And it's so beautiful. Oh my gosh, so sorry. My computer just randomly stopped recording because I ran out of space on my laptop, but I just freed up some space. So rude of it to stop recording in the middle of me talking about Heated Rivalry. But I think that I was saying during one of the interviews that I was watching, the interviewee was kind of asking, oh, like, why do you think this show is resonating so deeply with women? And they were saying that just because in particularly heterosexual relationships between a man and a women are usually the ones like doing the bulk of the talking or of trying to initiate emotional intimacy. But in relationships between two men, it's like one person has to do it. So they were just kind of talking about that. It's kind of that fresh perspective and just is very satisfying to watch, and it's like, okay, like men are capable of doing this. So yeah, I'm excited to read Hated Rivalry, and I'm also excited to read Madonna in a Fur Coat, both equally excited for. All right, I'm also very excited for this one. Look at how absolutely stunning this cover is. I do have the physical copy of this book too, which physical books they just hit so different. I do really love my Kindle, but something about reading the actual book just at a cafe has been absolutely incredible. All right, Nausea by Jean-Paul Sartre. I don't know how to say his last name, but he is one of the most, he's credited in philosophy for really being one of the most like prolific figures that talk about the idea of existentialism. And this book is really just about this. It follows the main character, and he just is incredibly existential to a point where he's like sick. It sickens him how much he thinks about life and what, like, how pointless life seems. And just, it's one of those books where there's not really major plots or any kind of storyline to the story. It's really just him living his life and him experiencing his life in this like state of sickening existentialism. And it just sounds incredibly interesting and kind of unlike any other piece of literature that I've heard of before. And I remember specifically right after I graduated from university, I was feeling quite a bit of existentialism in that I didn't know what to do. I didn't feel any yearn to follow any specific career path. I just felt very lost and very existential. And so I felt like this book is really going to speak to me. I think that sometimes reading a more exaggerated version of my internal states kind of makes me feel better. Like when I was reading Getting Lost a couple like last week, I guess, I was also kind of relating to some of the things that she was feeling, but in a less extreme sense. And so it was kind of relieving to know that the intense emotions that I'm feeling, like, at least they're not as intense as this. At least they're not entirely all consuming and like the absolute only thing that I can think about and the only thing that's leading me through my life. So yeah, this is my last one. I have one more book that I'm gonna read. It's called A Little Life, also by Claire Keegan, but honestly I was having a really hard time finding a good summary of the book, and so I don't really know how to explain it, so I'm just gonna skip over that one. This is quite a big book. I don't know how many pages it is, maybe around 700, but if I do start this book, I'm certainly not gonna finish it while I'm still here because I leave in about a week. But this book follows, I think, 4 friends, and each of these 4 friends have gone through deep traumas in their life, and it follows the lifetime of these friends, like over decades and decades, and it kind of shows how trauma is shaping them. I think it's just one of those books that are going to be incredibly raw and quite emotion provoking, which I really look forward to. This is also kind of one of the books that I don't know too much about, but it is quite a popular book, so I'm confident that maybe anyone that's watching this video is already familiar with it. But I think that this is just going to be something that is like very heart-wrenching and very raw. I feel like rawness is an emotion that I really seek out, particularly in literature. I find that really with like Giovanni's Room. I found that really in Getting Lost by Annie Ernaux. And I think that I'm going to be getting a lot of that during this book, which I'm excited for. But yeah, those are my Paris reading curriculum. I hope to make like a media wrap up at the end of the month for everything that I had consumed. So I'll hopefully be able to give my reviews on some of the books that I hadn't read so far.